welcome. You're at How to Pray as a Jew. And we've just come from our Mi Chamocha prayer, and which we ascertained that the main focus is Geula, or redemption. And we're moving on to the Hashkivenu prayer, keeping that in mind and seeing where it takes us. Linda, could you read the English, please?
Grant, O God, that we lie down in peace and raise us up, your guardian, to life renewed. Our guardian, to life renewed. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Guide us with your good counsel. For your name's sake, be our help. Shield and shelter us beneath the shadow of your wings. Defend us against enemies, illness, war, famine, and sorrow. Distance us from wrongdoing. For you, God, watch over us and deliver us. For you, God, are gracious and merciful. Guard our going out and coming in to life and to peace evermore.
Good. Who can tell me when this prayer is said during our Shabbat worship? Linda, I think you're muted. I see your mouth moving.
Okay, it's said at night.
It's said at night. And why is it said at night, Linda?
Because the first line says, grant that we lie down in peace.
Linda.
So interestingly, does anyone know what our foreparents believed happened at night? In terms of one's soul.
Your soul left you.
Your soul left you. Where did your soul go, Linda?
To heaven.
Well, who's
God?
God's hanging out with it. And then what happens in the morning?
It comes back.
How does it come back? How does it come back?
God sends it back.
Yeah, God breathes it back into you. Right? It's I'm sorry?
Okay.
One of the ways I like to think about it is it's kind of mouth-to-mouth resuscitation.
Except it's soul-to-soul resuscitation.
Well, I like to think that God sort of kisses it back to you. I don't know. It's just an imagery I really like. That. So, if at night, yeah.
For those of us with sleep apnea, does that mean God's waking us up?
Really super question. I don't know the answer, I gotta say. I'm not sure that the Talmud had talked about sleep apnea, but I'll have to give that a look. Put it in, see what I can find.
Sleep apnea in the biblical days.
So, I think I can understand how this would be very scary for our foreparents, wouldn't it? If you imagine that your soul was taken from you and that there had to be some way that God remembered or God conscientiously returned it to you. I would imagine that you'd have to have a lot of faith, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You'd have to have a lot of faith. And this, from this is like some sort of, almost feels to me like a little, voodoo is not the right word, but a little incantation to make sure that this happens. So there is, dear God, could you help us with these few things? But the last line I think is really telling. For you, God, are gracious and merciful. Guard our coming and going to life and peace evermore. That you, God, you're the butter up, right? A little bit of, you're the man, God, or you're the woman, God, but it is dependent that you return this soul to me so I might, declare your glory, that I might be able to praise you. It is a beautiful, beautiful prayer, but always felt to me like there was a little like superstition voodoo thingy. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I agree, especially after just talking about Lag Bomer yesterday, where all of Rabbi Akiva's students were killed by a plague, theoretically given by God.
Right. And Lag BaOmer is a day where that's lifted. Yeah, I mean, right. I think, as you, especially, if you imagine our ancestors in the natural world, how one explains a hurricane or how one explains, obviously in the desert, there's no hurricanes, but how one explains, let's say, a
There's
massive,
sandstorms.
yeah, a massive sandstorm or dust storm. How one explains any of what happens in the natural world, the sun going down behind what looks like possibly forever, and then coming up again over that horizon, must have felt like, whew, we dodged a bullet on that one last night, right?
Isn't all prayer like that? I mean, isn't all prayer a hopeful solicitation that whatever you want is going to be granted or come true? Or, I mean, I'm not sure how this is different. I mean, it's specific, yes, but it seems to me that all prayer has this in common, kind of.
Well, I think that to some extent that's true, but you look at something like the Shema, which is really a declaration, doesn't actually ask for anything in return, right? Micha Mocha is really praise. And yeah, probably everything behind it is like, if we praise, we have some expectations of what God's going to give us, right? That there's a buttering up, maybe, who is like the God among all the gods, all the gods who are worshipped, who's like you, mighty and awesome. Maybe, behind that might be, look at, we have some expectations of what that buys us.
Little sucking up.
Yeah, I think that that's certainly present, and that certainly the belief is inherent that by the praise, by the sucking up, that God will look favorably on us. I think that's for sure, for sure. Let's go to our next slide, Cassandra, if you don't mind. Let's go to the next one after that, please. Beautiful. Okay, one of the things we talk about in the Hashkivenu is a Sukkot Shlomecha, a sukkah of peace that's over us, right? That keeps us safe. And I happen to love this particular quote. Could someone please read it?
I can read it.
Great.
Jewish law validates a sukkah even when it has gaping holes, when it is built from little more than 2 walls or has large spaces between the walls and the roof. Even such a fragile structure still qualifies as a kosher sukkah. The same is true regarding peace. Peace is so precious, so vital, that even if we are unable to attain complete peace, we should still pursue a partial measure of peace. Even in an imperfect peace between neighbors or between an individual and the community is worthwhile. How great is peace, proclaim the sages, Vayikra Rabbah. The value of peace is so great that we pray for it even when it will be like a sukkah, flimsy and temporary, rendered fit only by special laws.
Wow, that's very interesting.
It is interesting, Bindi, and I think the reason that it's interesting is that Judaism doesn't ask for perfection. What I mean by that is Judaism doesn't ask for things that can't be given. So even when we're talking about God spreading over a sukkah of peace over us, we're not, although the hope might be for some messianic time, we'll take whatever small measure of peace we can get. and call that good enough, right? It's like the blessing for rain we're going to come to in the tefillah. We don't ask for rain when it's not the rainy season, right? It's not like our prayer is some sort of Indian raid dance where we're asking for something that couldn't possibly come in the moment we're asking for it. We're asking for what is possible, right? Even though the hope might be for messianic perfection, we understand we're not there yet. So we're willing to take even a modicum of goodness. And I think that's kind of fabulous. Anybody want to add anything?
Well, I have a question. I mean, in the current state of Israel, does anyone pay attention to this? I mean, it seems to me that are they using this to justify that they can build the settlements because it's going to reinforce some sort of peace or something? I don't know. It's just
I don't think the settlers are thinking about it in terms of bringing about peace. I think the settlers are thinking of it in terms of bringing about what they feel is rightfully theirs.
yeah.
And therein lies the danger, right? Because it's not with an eye towards peace. It's an eye towards what they feel is God's will. And
Don't you have to justify it some way, and maybe they're
well,
using.
they feel very justified. God said.
Oh,
No, I mean the Torah says this land will be yours, and they figure that means all of it.
oh, yeah.
So that's certainly as more liberal Jews, that's something we can't even get our head around. Is it they're doing it? The price of that is peace. So, hi Richard, glad you're here. We're going to move on to our next slide. Okay. All right. So we talked about this word geula, redemption. Okay. So here's where this connection comes. Richard, would you be kind enough to read after Beit Yosef Orach Chaim 236?
I don't see Richard.
Richard's muted. Let me unmute.
Yeah, Richard's muted.
I don't see his.
Oh, now he's not.
Okay. In the Talmud, Rabbi
Yochanan.
says,
Sorry.
says that one needs to follow the evening gula directly with the evening.
Tefillah. I'm sorry I gave you all these Hebrew words, Richard. I'll read this one. I'll let you read the next one because it's like a Hebrew mess here. Sorry about that. So
That's okay. It's small print anyway, so.
yeah, right, and that doesn't make things better. I get it for sure. Rabbi Yochanan says that one needs to follow the evening geula or redemption prayer, and what he means is the michamocha, with the evening tefillah. We might see the hashkivenu as a pause, but instead we should see it as an extension of redemption or geula. We should view it just like the preface, I can't read the English now. Adonai Sephatai, open my lips, which was instituted as part of the tefillah. We see the hashkivenu as an extension of the geula, the redemption, in that when God plagued Egypt, God caused a great fear upon the people amidst the darkness. They prayed to the Holy One that the angel of death would not come to their houses to inflict death upon them. The hashkivenu is a reminder of the fear the Israelites faced during the time of redemption. Therefore, it is part of the redemption prayer. Does that make sense?
No.
So what they're saying is, this is like part of the michamocha, because it harkens back, like the michamocha does, to that time in Egypt. When we were slaves, the angel of death passes over, and this hashkivenu is reminder of the angel of death passing over. And why does he pass over? So we can be free. Therefore, the michamocha, that prayer we do that discusses our redemption, this is just an extension of it. Does that make more sense?
Yes.
Which changes the way we're looking at the Hashkivenu, doesn't it? That therefore it follows the formula of the Geula or the, Nancy, I just love that dog.
Thank you.
Like a dog on my shoulder, of course.
Yes.
Not a bird, but a dog. So it's just an extension of that. Okay, let's move on. All right, our next prayer is the Vishamru. Yeah, this is a lovely, lovely, lovely prayer. So let's read the English, starting with the people of Israel shall keep Shabbat. Reuben, do you want to read?
Sure.
Just the English at the bottom, then we'll turn the slide. The people of Israel.
The people of Israel shall keep Shabbat, observing Shabbat throughout the ages as a covenant for all time.
For all time. Next slide. Go ahead. It is a sign.
A sign for all time between me and the people of Israel.
Next slide.
For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth.
On the seventh day.
And on the seventh day God ceased from work and was refreshed.
One more slide. It's just a repetition. Oops, maybe not. Okay, so what do we notice about this Vishamru? What is this about?
Keeping Shabbat.
Well, about keeping Shabbat, but what does it harken back to? Why do we keep Shabbat?
Because of creation.
Because of creation.
Yeah.
Because God does.
Yeah.
Right? God is the first keeper of Shabbat. And by following in the footsteps, we're just being like God. We're being godlike, if you will. So this is sort of, we got to think of Vishamru. We got to think of this Shabbat idea. This is revolutionary, guys, that there is a day of rest, right? We take it so for granted, right? But this is revolutionary. There was no such thing as a weekend, right? Right? Here is a day of not, and we're farmers, a day of not plowing the field or sowing or planting or weeding or, digging holes. This is revolutionary.
If you had cows, you'd have had to milk them, though.
Well, the work is defined as, remember we talked about malacha, and that means the work of building the tabernacle is work we can't do on Shabbat, right? Kindness to animals is a mitzvah, right? You have to milk a cow. Why? Because it would be terribly uncomfortable for the animal.
Right.
Right?
But it's not considered work.
It's not considered work. It's not malacha because it wasn't part of the work of the tabernacle.
Huh.
Just like this is the funniest story, and Devorah will remember it, but a young man named Jonathan Lowe, who is like one of the great, I adore him, on his bar mitzvah speech, which he put aside, he went off the cuff. One of the things he pointed out was that he felt he was doing work. And he didn't understand. He thought it was incongruous for him to be getting up and doing the work of a bar mitzvah on Shabbat. But that's not malacha, that's avodah, which also means prayer. So the word avodah means work, but it also means prayer, right? So certain work is not work at all and is allowable on Shabbat. All right, let's move on. So we've just come from, here we go, hearkening back to creation.
What was the word for work that was not prayer?
Malacha. I would spell it M-A-L-A-C-H-A. Malacha.
Thank you.
All right, who will read this next thing?
The root means to keep, protect, or to guard. which is what God expects of us vis-a-vis the Sabbath day. How does one guard a day?
So stop for a second. How does one guard a day? Or protect a day? What does that mean to you?
That means putting, I mean, to me, that means like putting ritual around it to like make it separate from the rest.
I love that.
Yeah, that's good.
Anybody else have an idea how one guards a day? So for me, this is an off the hook moment, right? If I'm guarding the day, I am, I can't possibly be looking at my email.
Say that
I have to
again.
be protective of me. I see it as a way of being protective of me and of my worship. And my worship has some rules around it. And one of the things I think we all have to do in this class, and we all have to do as Jews, is decide what those rules are. What are our rules of Shabbat? Because they're different for everybody in the Reform community. Devorah?
I used to be somewhat careful about using the internet on Shabbat, but now that I'm trying to get to services, get to a class, whatever, not so much. Sometimes I need to check email to find the link. Sometimes I need to email the person and say the link isn't working, you know, that kind of stuff. So it's made that part kind of hard, but Shabbat has always been different. And this one uses the word protect or guard. And the other one that talks about Shabbat is to zachor, to remember.
That is lovely. Richard, is there a way you protect the Sabbath day?
I suppose by trying to strengthen my prayer life during that time.
Your what?
Prayer
My
life.
life of prayer,
Okay.
to concentrate more on the prayer.
That's lovely. Anyone else want to share how they might guard their day?
When I was in my congregation in Gary, we didn't have Saturday morning services, and we only had a part-time rabbi, which was actually very cool because we were lay-led. But one of the things that I did there is we started something called Shabbat Club, and we would very mindfully, only once a month, but it was fabulous, very mindfully, a group of us would share really special things together. And sometimes it was poetry, it was always food, it was always, you know, there was always some kind of activity. And we would always do Havdalah together. And it was, and we all had little bags to put our phones in, which was very cool.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
We should do something like that at Emmanuel. That's really special. I love
Yeah,
it.
it was great fun. I mean, you know, because we were in Gary, sometimes we would hike the dunes, you know, other times we played terribly. I mean, we played Cards Against Humanity during Shabbat. It was great. You know?
I love it.
It
Yeah.
sounds like camp.
It was like little, yeah, it was like little 4 hours of camp once a week.
I love it.
I mean, once a month, yeah.
I love it. Anyone else want to share how they guard their Sabbath day?
Well, my family, especially during the summer, love to take walks either along the lakefront in Evanston or in the forest preserves during the morning, and we sing our form of a Shabbat service. And
Love it. All right, Linda, keep reading instead, starting at instead.
Instead, and this is crucial, we guard its existence. It reminds us that we become godlike when we protect, guard, keep, and observe Shabbat as they greet.
As a covenant.
Covenant.
Yeah. there is the Jewish notion that one gets an extra soul on Shabbat, which is so extraordinary, right? It's such an extraordinary idea that we increase as soulful individuals. We're that God loves us so much that God allows for this expansion. I think that's a really extraordinary idea. Let's turn our slide, because I do want to get to the tefillah if we can. Anyone want to give this a read? Richard, this is more better. If you want to read this. Richard, are you there? Let me unmute you. Oops, I did it.
Oh, okay. We're both trying to unmute.
I'm sorry, we're both trying, and neither of us
There you go.
did. Sorry about that.
The Sabbath is a weekly act of love and communion, a meeting point between God and Israel. This metaphor of the Sabbath as a celebration of the relationship between God and Israel has other expressions as well. For example, the rabbis considered the Sabbath an ideal time for spouses to make love, signifying their intimate relationship.
Let's stop there.
Also,
Let's stop right there, because I love this, right? Sex is celebrated in Judaism. Sex between two loving individuals is celebrated, and you get double mitzvah points for sexual relations on the Sabbath, right? Now, this is different than some parts of our Christian sisters' beliefs.
As long as you're married.
Well, as long as you're, let's say this, in a committed relationship, and who knows what committed means, right? Committed, who knows, right? But I love this idea that it's not something to be embarrassed or horrified about. It's something to be celebrated. And there's a day where you get, like I said, double mitzvah points for anyone playing along.
This is a true story. There is actually a book. You can buy it on Amazon. It is called Double Mitzvah, and it is a romance novel centered around this premise. With like Fabio on the cover, flowing hair.
Fabio.
And the cover, there's a couple with like Fabio, and then there are Shabbos candles lit and a challah with a cover on it. I'll see if I can find it and I'll send it to you. It's hilarious.
That's hysterical.
It's a real thing.
That is hysterical. That voice, guys, is Cassandra. She's our Oz. She's our great and powerful Oz behind the scenes. Okay, let's keep going after the sex part.
oh, they also saw the reading of the Torah.
Oops, she went mute again. Richard, unmute. Richard? Oh, I can't unmute you, Richard.
Okay.
There we go. They also
What
start
was
there.
that silly phone interrupting for?
No worries.
Sorry.
No worries.
They also saw the reading of the Torah on Shabbat as a reenactment of the establishment of the covenant between God and Israel when God revealed the Torah on Mount Sinai. The
Shamru.
Shamru prayer highlights our role in observing the Sabbath as a way of protecting the covenant. As the famous Zionist thinker Ahad Ha'am once said, more than Israel has kept the Sabbath has kept Israel.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you, Richard. We're going to move on. Here's a teaser. Here's a question. Is singing Vishamru done at every Shabbat service?
Oh, no, is it?
Bum, 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 bum. Please place your wagers.
I know we haven't sung it that much on Shabbat services.
The answer is no. Let's go to our next slide.
Gosh.
There is quite a debate as to whether it is considered an interruption between the Geula, those redemption, Michamocha, right? And the Tefillah, which we're coming to. For those congregations that do include the Vishamru, it's done with the blessing of rabbinic authorities who say that it is an extension of the Michamocha, a prolonged Geula, redemption prayer, because the Sabbath is our redemption. That reasoning is really a stretch of logic to include a prayer that people really want to say, which has many melodies that the Jews are attracted to, especially here in America. Okay, so Ruben, I put this in for you. It's interesting to note that according to one of my Orthodox sources, many synagogues in Israel do not say the Vishamru because the Vilna Gaon, okay, now the Vilna Gaon is a very big, very, very big deal in terms of a Talmudic a sage. He lived in the second half of the 18th century, and he was very famous and important rabbinic authority, objected to reciting it, and they followed his ruling.
Why did he object?
Because he felt like it interrupted the flow. Look at here's our diagram. So we're here at the Shema, and it's blessings, right? And we just talked about the Micha Mocha, right? And as a redemption prayer, right? And then we have the Hashkivenu and the Vishamru. Now we're talking about redemption, and redemption is an important feature in one of the themes that we like to repeat Jewishly. Why? Because without redemption, we wouldn't be able to pray as a Jewish people, right? We don't get out of Egypt, folks, and there is no Jews, correct? So our Mount Sinai moment is what builds our ability to be Jews and to be sort of the living keepers of the one God. These two prayers kind of upset the apple cart in terms of through line, because one is a prayer for, hey, can you keep me safe? And the other one is a prayer for, listen, the keeping of the Sabbath is important. Now, ostensibly, folks know the keeping of the Sabbath is important. That's why they're there, right? And I think the Vilna Gaon felt like really this was a chance to sort of, it interrupted the flow, but also it's done because a lot of us just really love singing it, which didn't seem to be like maybe a good enough reason. I don't know, I'd have to go back and look at the other reasons he gives for not thinking that this was something we should do.
Cantor?
Yeah.
I think it's the same reason why Orthodox Jews are doing Debbie Friedman's Misha Berach.
Who would have ever thought, right?
It's
We're doing her Havdalah too.
It's interesting. It's a very interesting thing. Okay, so we're here. I don't know if you can't see my cursor, but we're heading towards the Amidah, right? So that, yeah, thank you, Cassandra. Let's go back to the next, let's go to the next slide. I just wanted to start it for you to see where we're at. This next prayer goes by 3 names. The Amidah, which literally means the standing. The Shemona Esrei. Does anyone know what the two words Shemona Esrei mean?
18.
The 18. Okay. And the third is actually Ha Tefillah. Does anyone know what Ha Tefillah means?
The prayer?
The prayer. The, like with a capital T, capital P. The prayer. All right, who's willing to read this?
I'll read it.
Okay.
Amidah means standing. This prayer was designed by the rabbis of the 1st century to substitute for the sacrificial rites of the temple. Each morning in the Temple of Jerusalem, a daily offering was prepared. This offering was meant to convey the ongoing loyalty of our people to God and to specifically request God's blessings for a day of prosperity and peace. Each Sabbath and festival, an additional offering was prepared in celebration of the special day. We therefore have a morning Amidah, reflecting our daily needs, and a special Musaf Amidah, or additional Amidah, on Sabbath and festivals. The Amidah is actually a composite prayer made up of a series of individual blessings. The composition of this series is specific to each service. On Sabbath, we recite a series of 7 blessings. On weekdays, 19.
Now, what did I just tell you Shemona Esrei meant? 18.
18.
Keep that in mind. There are 19 prayers in a prayer that's called the 18. And I'm going to explain why, but just ruminate. Okay, keep going, Bind.
Whatever the occasion, the first and last 3 blessings always remain the same. It is the middle blessings that adjust for each day. On weekdays, we request God's blessings of prosperity and peace. On Shabbat, we reflect on the uniqueness of the Sabbath day. The obligation to pray 3 times a day, which was established by Ezra and codified in the Talmud, Barachot 26b, is fulfilled by reciting the Amidah.
Right, so the Amidah counts as a full-on, you did it. You did your thing. Excellent, fabulous, right? You prayed. Let's move on to the next slide. There's so much to unpack here, guys. We could spend days just on the Amidah. It's such good stuff. All right, who's going to read this next slide, please? Ruby, go ahead.
Go on.
Ruben, you want to go ahead?
Okay. You should know that from the days of Moshe Rabbeinu until the period of the men of the Great Assembly, prayer in Israel was not arranged in a definite order for anyone alike. Each individual prayed for himself according to his knowledge, wisdom, and clarity of expression. This was the general practice until the men of the Great Assembly ordained the Amidah, so that there would be a set prayer for all the people of Israel alike.
So what I want you to read here is they wanted to help people have sort of a roadmap. But what I really like about this is that prayer wasn't originally in any, there's another Jewish opinion, I'm sure. But prayer wasn't arranged in any definite order, which allows for a tradition that says that you can pray whatever you want here, right? They codified it, yeah, I get it. But it allows this Amidah section, if more than any other prayer, allows for you to riff, right? It allows for a little jasmine in innovations, right? Which gives us some freedom, which you can take, excuse me, especially if the Hebrew trips you up. So let's move on. I don't know if we'll get where I want, but.
Oh my.
Yeah, I know there's a lot to read here. So, Devorah, give us a read, Devorah.
One monumental accomplishment of the men of the Great Assembly was the formulation of a universal Jewish prayer service. Today, the centerpiece of every service is the prayer known as the Amidah, literally the standing prayer. It and its attendant prayers were apparently absent in the First Temple era. The need for such a formalized prayer only first arose when the Jews went into exile in Babylon. During the exile, the communal experience of the 3 times a year pilgrimage to the temple left the vacuum.
So remember, there's no temple standing. So nobody's going anywhere, right? Okay, go ahead.
And they're in Babylon.
And they're exiled, that's correct.
Therefore, the leaders in Babylon codified a system of prayer that substituted for the temple service. They based this on the prophetic verse, "Our lips will substitute for sacrifices," Hosea. When the Jews returned from Babylon to the land of Israel and rebuilt the temple, they brought along with them the prayers they had learned in Babylon. the men of the Great Assembly arranged, placed in order, edited, and formulated the words of the Amidah, as well as its accompanying prayers. This arrangement continued through the entire Second Temple era and has continued through today.
All right, so we touched upon this briefly, but this is how the Jewish people survived, right? You take a group of people and say, the way you pray to God, you can no longer do. And you're going to find that a group could easily die out, right? If there's no way to be Jewish, the hell's the point? Grab yourself an idol and let's go, right? This was brilliant. And what an innovation to say that prayer can somehow substitute for the way we communicate with God is amazing. And this is why I like to say all Judaism is Reform Judaism, right? All Judaism had to reform or we wouldn't be here, right? Remember I told you a little bit about the Ma'amadot, those who stood while the sacrifices and prayed, right? In different parts of Israel who weren't being able to come to the temple. And that this ability to pray is just is sort of an extension of that, but it's a brilliant extension. Any comments? Question? No? Okay, cool. Okay, so I had you ruminate. What do you think that 19th prayer is? Any ideas? Throw them out.
Somebody came up with one later.
Okay, but do you know what it was about, Bind? What was the subject matter? I think you're really gonna like this. I don't know if you could. Okay, Devorah?
Is it Oseh Shalom?
No. The peace prayer was there. All right, let's turn the slide because you're not gonna believe it. Wait, I had the wrong slide in the wrong order. Wait, no, it might be my fault. Go ahead, Cassandra. Put the next slide up. Shucks, where is it? Go one more slide. Cassandra, I might have.
There.
One more slide. One more slide. Darn it. One more slide. One more slide. Darn it, the slide's not there. Okay, let me tell you the reason. You're gonna love this. Anybody know about the Sadducees, the Pharisees?
Yeah, sort of.
What do you know, Bindle?
Not much. No, I can't. I just, I know the words.
Okay, so
The Sadducees were strict and the Pharisees were not.
yes, yeah. Well, let me go a step further. So the Sadducees were part of the Sanhedrin, and the Pharisees were the rabbis. So we have two sort of groups. The Sadducees are priests, believe in this sort of priestdom, and the Pharisees are the rabbis. The Sadducees believe in a more, that really information or the way that we live our lives is solely Torah based, the 5 books of Moses. The Pharisees believe that the oral law is part of what we call Torah. Now, that makes sense because the rabbis are coming up with the oral Torah. So, of course, they're going to want to include it in, right?
Sure.
So, you have this constant, for lack of a better word, bickering between these two Jewish sects. The 19th prayer is a prayer the rabbis, remember the rabbis are creating the Amidah, right? Put in for heretics. And who do they think of as heretics? The Sadducees, right? Which is so Jewish, really. It's just like perfectly Jewish, of course, right? You know, you don't have Judaism right. We're the only ones who have Judaism right. We're still doing that dance, right? We're still playing that game, right?
Right.
Oh, the Reform Jews don't know what they're doing. Oh, the Orthodox Jews, they don't know. That's not Judaism, right?
And the conservative, we don't count at all.
Everybody's wrong but me. I'm the only one, right, who knows really how to be Jewish. I just had to put that in because it's funny. It's also a little sad, isn't it? It's a little sad. We can't open our tent. But anyway, that's the 19th. All right, let's move ahead.
Is anyone going to respell that word there?
Oh, go back.
Yes, it's spelled
Sorry. Yeah.
wrong.
Okay.
Oh, terribly.
I am very sorry. There are going to be typos. There are going to be typos. I am an imperfect creature.
We will never forgive you for typos.
I know. Thank you. All right, here are the rules around. So let's just do a little recap. And then we might, depending on what the next slide is, which I need to remember what I put, what I wrote. So who will read this? We're just doing a little recap. Richard, do a little recap.
Where's Richard?
There is never, oh, I'm sorry.
You're right, Richard. Go for it. There is never.
There is never a Jewish prayer service without an Amidah.
It's true. Keep going.
It is our conversation with God. Torah is God's answer to us.
Right. So this set of prayers is right before we have a virtual meeting with God. Right?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Let me say that. I said that wrong. These are the prayers where we have a virtual meeting with God. But it comes right before God has a virtual meeting with us. Namely that here is the litany, God, and God answers during the Torah service. The first 3 paragraphs are praiseworthy, are paragraphs of praise, and we're going to go more in depth next week. I always think we're going to have more time than we have, but anyway. And traditionally, this is for you, Ruben, traditionally they're done silently. The Amidah is done silently, everybody doing it silently. And the Chazan comes in with repetition and the Kedusha. During the weekdays, the other 13 are replaced with a blessing. During the week, during Shabbat, I should have written another typo. The other 13 prayers are replaced with a blessing sanctifying the day, which we're going to go to Yismachu and Ritzeva, beautiful prayers. Because the Talmud said it's forbidden to ask for personal needs on Shabbat. So during a weekday Amidah, guys, there are 13 prayers of petition. Wow. Yeah. God grant us this. God grant us that. Could we please have a little touch of this? May our praise be acceptable. I'm just sort of going through them in my head. You're a God of healing. So there's just a whole series of them. But we can't ask for stuff on Shabbat. Why can't we ask for stuff on Shabbat?
Oh. Because it's selfish?
Okay, maybe.
Because we're resting?
But why would resting, we're Jewish. We always kvetch. Why would resting mean we couldn't kvetch?
Because maybe the kvetching is malakah.
Right, exactly. They kvetched as they made the Mishkan. I'm sure they did. Sure they did. What is Shabbat supposed to be? A taste of?
Day of peace.
A day of peace. Okay, for sure. What else? It's a day that's supposed to be perfect, right? It's a day of the world to come. What that would be like. How dare we ask for something on this perfect taste of the world to come? Right? When there would be no want in the world to come, by the way. Right? Everything's going to be taken care of. All your needs will be met.
Who decided that?
Well, it wasn't me, but let me say that. But this is part of the rabbis, the Great Assembly. This is what they hammered out. So let's go to the next slide and just see. I don't think we can really touch upon, maybe we can. All right, let's stop here because the next bit is how the physical manifestations. You notice a lot during the prayer service, right? There are bowing, there's moving, there's whatever we're doing, there's rising on our toes. I want to talk about some of the choreography, and that's what we'll start with next week. Okay?
Cantor,
Yes.
there's a whole lot less of that now that we're on Zoom.
Really true. It's really true. Any questions before we leave for next week? We leave for tomorrow. We're not leaving for next week. We see each other next week.
Been very helpful.
Wonderful. I'm so glad you're with me. It really makes it really special. So thanks so much. Lovely seeing all your punams. And I look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.